You're listening to the Perth Property Show, Australia's only weekly property podcast by West Australian experts for West Australian listeners. Catch your latest episode every Monday at 7 a.m.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Perth Property Show. My name's Trent Fleskens, your host. As always, this week we're going to have a chat about a suburb we haven't spoken about ever in nearly 400 episodes. Initially because the conversation probably didn't do a lot for us when talking about what's happening on the Perth basis, especially when the conversation has been up the whole time. You'd be focusing on properties and suburbs that offer as much amenity as possible, as close to Perth and as close to the water as possible. But the conversation now, I think, has to start becoming a little more defensive. We need to be a little smarter about what we're buying. And to be defensive, we want to have a conversation with the top agents in the areas where the canary in the coal mine is. And that suburb, as per the header of this episode, is Byford. And the agent I want to speak to about Byford is Sean Dunn from Minute. How you going, mate?
Very good, thank you, Trent. How are you?
Yeah, great, thank you. Now, for everyone listening, right at the end of the Albanel line, it's now the Byford line, isn't it?
Absolutely, the brand new train station has arrived.
It's pretty schmick, I assume.
It's very schmick, it's very clean, and it's working very well.
Many people taking it yet? Because it takes a while to change behaviours, doesn't it? A lot of people for a couple of decades now would have been driving to Armidale train station or just driving to work, I guess.
A lot of people that I know in the suburb when I first started working there would normally just drive into Armidale, park up there, and then actually commute to the city. But from what I know from speaking to a lot of people who have lived in Byford and have recently moved into Byford, have now actually using that Byford train station. I know a lot of people using it not only just to commute to the city for work, but also to events, games, footy, and all of that as well. Anyone
giving you feedback whilst we're chatting about it that they weren't thinking Byford, but now that there is a station there, it's made a difference? Or do you think that's probably a bit of fluff?
No, from conversations that I've actually spoken to a lot of people about, because that train station coming in there, not only for, exactly local home buyers, that has definitely shifted their views and where they want to buy, but also just obviously investors as well buying now in that area.
It means something to them.
100%, yeah, it does.
It's amenity, and that shift in amenity, going from not having one to having one, is a big difference compared to a suburb that, let's call it Langford, for example, that really hasn't had any change in amenity for decades on the same corridor. Even if you think about a place like Gosnells, for example, a couple of times with a Shane Beaumont, not a huge amount of change in amenity, more of a change in perspective to that amenity, given how far that train line's going now. Gosnells is not as close to the end of the train line as it used to be.
No.
It's got 18,000 people in it. It's growing every day. It's a pretty big suburb now, isn't it?
Yes, it's a huge suburb and very diverse. Yeah.
How so?
Diverse in the way that you've got different sort of sections of Byford. If we're going to talk about the history of Byford, Byford used to be just a rural town, and now it's obviously becoming like what I call a little mini city in the southeast corridor of Perth. And diverse in the way that one side of Southwestern Highway, you've got what we call or we deem old side of Byford, and that's all your sort of half an acre blocks, and there's a lot of older houses on there, some new ones, some new subdivisions throughout there, but majority of them being over a quarter acre.
Rural
houses.
Residential sort of stuff.
Absolutely. And then to the other side, you've got the new schools, the new shops, the new estates, 450 square metres. You've got some going up to 700, but then averaging out between that sort of 375 to 450 square metre now.
What other amenities are there in Byford that people may have assumed weren't there a few years ago? Just the basics. What do you got?
So obviously we've got the Coles and the Woolies down there now, which Byford used to only just have a butcher. But the biggest one I've heard from all the families down there is the Aldi opening up. That was a big one when I heard that. But then we've also got obviously all other amenities, including cafes, restaurants, all the way through. Local cafes and restaurants as well. And a lot of people in Byford just stay in Byford, and that's probably the coolest thing I think about Byford, is that Byford's got basically everything from smaller houses to big houses, and then from small businesses to big businesses as well.
So what you're saying is someone in Byford, in a similar way to maybe an Alkimos, probably isn't very city-centric. They're probably not spending their day going into the city.
Yeah, correct. A lot of people in Byford don't need to go to the city.
A lot of tradies, I assume, then?
There's heaps of tradies, yeah. A lot of FIFO workers as well in Byford, just making that one commute in the morning. On
Tonkin Highway. Yep.
That's it. And you're straight up there. Yeah.
Now, the reason I got you in to have a chat about Byford is, as I said, it's canary in the coal mine. In January, we saw the lowest stock on market ever in West Australian history at 1,800 properties thereabouts.
Yep.
It was taking 8 days to sell a property. Neither of those two things are good things for the market. It means there's no opportunity for choice. Everything's desperation. And the mobility issue becomes a real problem. We spoke about that for months and months and months until things finally started opening up, mainly because of interest rates and then a kick in the guts over the last couple of months with regards to budget as well. That direction has ticked up from January, as it was always going to have to do, through 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, and now we're at 6,400 properties on the market, which is still half of a balanced market. The trajectory obviously is going back towards that 12,000, 13,000 balanced space. Transactions have gone from 50 transactions a week to about 700, and we noticed that, and that differential is what's causing stock on market to rise. And then the days on market has gone from your 8-9 days to your 18, 19 days, which again,
yes,
pretty good market
yes.
still to be in. But over the last couple of years, when you compare it what it was like even just a year ago to now, or even 6 months ago to now, I think Byford's probably got the most on the ground story because it's where the tide comes out first, in my opinion. What was life like for you as an agent a year ago, 6 months ago versus now?
So, look, going back 12 months ago in Byford, obviously it was a very different market to what we're experiencing now, but the main thing was, like you said, that sort of desperation, the urgency of people, local investors, local buyers, where over East investors, that urgency of them buying property was just the whole talk of the town last year. And no matter what the property was, we saw, I would say, averaging between 10 to 15 groups always at our home opens last year, compared to this year currently now. I mean, last weekend we opened up 4 properties and experienced an average groups between 1 to sort of 3 groups, at 5 being the absolute maximum. The biggest difference with offers as well, we used to receive multiple offers from multiple buyers. It wasn't just a specific, all right, here's your first home buyer offer. It wasn't a specific, it's always going to be an investor offer. It was from diverse buyers, and we would receive multiple, and buyer management was tough because you're trying to manage this person's offer, this person's offer, this person's offer. At the moment, no such thing. If we get an offer on the property, it's a good thing. It's a good sign. You've got to use it with care. You've got to treat them with care.
So the whole customer service has changed from managing disappointment to trying to keep them on the hook.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great way to explain it. In terms of what I've personally experienced in the sort of last 12 months, very obviously new, very, very different for myself, but it's gone from a market where selling was not as tough to a market now where selling is tough. And what I exactly mean by that is that the listings and getting the listing, getting the business is not exactly as hard. I mean, it was hard for myself considering that I'm still a new agent in the ground, still working for that listing is tough, but bringing that listing to the actual market and actually selling it compared to now, there's definitely a lot more work we have to do behind the scenes to actually get that market to going through with an offer and then going through to settlement.
Tell us about that work, how much more work you're doing, because it always seems like as an agent, people from the outside can look at it and go, oh, it's so easy for you. But when it's a market like a year ago, it's so much work managing buyer expectations and dealing with hundreds of calls. Yes. And really, really hard to get a listing in the first place. But then when you've got all that, obviously the sell side isn't very hard to close, right? Everyone's pretty happy at the end when the transaction goes through.
Yes.
And now we're moving to a market where relative to that, but still not relative anywhere near to what it was in 2018, 2019, you've probably finding there's more opportunities for listings, but there's also more work to do to bring an offer now to a seller that has still, I assume, pretty high expectations. I mean, 5-6 years ago, if you brought an offer to someone in Byford that started with a 5 in front of it, they'd be pretty impressed.
They would.
What do they expect now for a standard house in Byford?
At the moment, the Byford median price still stands around the 850,000 mark. But if we're going to, let's talk average sort of 450 square metres. 850 would be a great price. And last year we were achieving, 4x2s on 400 to 450 square metres around that 850 mark, saying that it's a 10-year-old property. At the moment, those price expectations are still there with the sellers, and they still have those sellers' expectations from last year, and explaining to them that the market's changed, the market's shifted, where it's tough because obviously they're going, hey, look at this data from only 6 months ago. My neighbour sold.
Yeah, Sue and Greg, they sold it for 850. Now house is we got a pool.
Yeah, absolutely. And having those conversations is obviously just part of the process and part of the game. But
well, what is happening? So what are the offers you bring to the table now? What do they look like and what are the terms?
A great example would be a recent sale that I've had. One was in April this year in 2026. It was number 25 Darren Way. We ended up achieving 860 for this property. It was about a 4x2 and 400 square metres, 10 years old. And we are currently selling the next door neighbour's house at the moment, which is a different layout, but predominantly the exact same land size, 4x2. It's all the same, 10 years old, built at the same time, and offers-wise, we ended up getting only in around the high 700s for that property.
Okay.
That big difference of $70,000, my vendors are going, well, Sean, you sold this one just 4 months ago for this price. Why am I discounting my price all the way down to here?
What do you think that is? What's the reason for it? Is it they can't afford to get to 860 because the interest rates are higher, or they don't feel like they have to because there's less people at the home open that they're competing with?
I think exactly your second point, Trent, with just basically when that budget was released and a lot of those investors were either scared off or feared and not actually making those offers, that urgency was gone. We felt that predominantly in Byford because a lot of our buyers were investors. So a lot of those buyers just sort of walked out the door, no longer come to home opens, they don't rock up. And partially of that, first home buyers who come in or local buyers who come in, they will discount their offer based off, okay, I'm the only one here at the home open, or there's only one other guy and myself, and this property's been on the market now for 3 to 4 weeks. Let's chuck in this offer and see how we go. And for us, looking at that, going, all right, this is the only offer that we've got after 3 to 4 weeks, is that telling me this is the market value?
It's interesting because that same property a year ago, would 790 have been a good price?
That same property, 790, would have been an awesome price.
Isn't it funny?
Yeah.
A year ago, right? So what we've experienced, I think, especially in the places like Byford and all those suburbs really that are under 850 in terms of options, is that people went a bit stupid from 1st of October with the 5% scheme. It's probably pushed all those properties that are in the 700s up to 850.
Yes.
And with interest rates now kicking in and the budget, a lot of that's been lost, and it's come back to a price that last year was a great price. Simply in that segment, I think, most specifically, right, where it does matter on interest rates on affordable and also investor activity as well, right? Have you noticed that there's a bit of a correlation there?
Yes. You've explained that greatly, and I agree with it from what I see on the ground firsthand.
Yeah, and that comes down to, I think, seller expectations. A year ago, people would have been ecstatic in Byford for a 4x2 at 790 because they know they paid 400 grand for it maybe only a few years ago.
Yeah.
So they've pretty much doubled their money for a property. They probably haven't improved.
Yes.
But that blip of excess that we saw over Christmas last year that brought us to the extremes that we saw in January this year has probably warped a few people's expectations. And look, a lot of sellers got lucky when they did sell up until about April this year. I think people just need to recognise there's been a bit of a moderation on that. Does that mean that prices just continually fall in a linear direction from here back towards 400 grand? No. What it means is there's been a bit of a resetting back, probably what is fair value on demand and supply up in the high 700s, which is still, I think, a fantastic price point.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to get your thoughts on what price you think you're selling this property for at Christmas time. Is it higher? Is it the same? Is it lower?
I think it would be the same.
So you're saying sideways direction?
I think depending what happens in the next few months with the interest rates will be the biggest dictator of what happens with our prices, as interest rates hold a huge play in the Byford market.
So let's say the Sydney economy starts to collapse because of issues happening with the market there, right?
Yep.
Things get really precarious. RBA actually cuts a rate before Christmas. Now, I'm not expecting it to happen, but let's say it did happen. That starts to obviously help with affordability. Media sentiment starts to look more positive again suddenly. Does that have an impact on Byford straight away?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely, because a lot of people that I meet, buyers mainly as well, a lot of them when we're in those sort of final stages of negotiations, we can really hear how much the extra dollar would help or how much the extra dollar saved wouldn't. And I think that play is very, very important for anything to do with the interest rates, serviceability, and our prices in Byford.
So super sensitive to the bottom line at the end of the day.
Yes.
So are you telling me that investors are gone in Byford at the moment?
At the moment, look, from what I experienced on the ground, I'm not going to say they're gone because I did have an investor buy a property from myself last week. So they're definitely not gone, but there's definitely less of them. I used to deal with probably at least 50% investors. There's a certain demographic of investors that are coming out now.
Are they the vultures?
Vultures, yeah, it's a great way to describe them.
Lowballing, wasting your time?
Yes, absolutely. They're just sort of chucking in an offer here, writing up a ChatGPT email and just sending it out to 3 listings that we've got. So yeah, they are coming out. But the investors of the ones that I used to know last year that would just throw in an offer over market value and just know that they're going to rent it out and it would be positive, they're gone. Yeah. There's no such thing.
Yeah, that's that speculation.
Yes.
So there's two sides of a coin to the investors, and yeah, it's funny how sentiment obviously drives which one you're going to get an email from
Yes,
throughout the week.
Yeah.
Settlement terms. What does it look like when someone's putting an offer on that property for $790? What are the terms?
We are looking at, normally with a lot of buyers that we deal with, obviously go through the pre-approvals and all that, and a lot of them are normally looking around between that 6 to 8 weeks. Finance days, we're looking at giving them 28 days. However, with recent dealings, a lot of the banks and so a lot of our buyers are asking for extensions. Whether the banks are knuckling down, I mean, we're experiencing that AML stuff firsthand from real estate agents. That's slowing down the process on our end, and the banks are implying that to all their loan docs and things like that, which I know from speaking to a few clients that it's slowed down their process. But normally 28 days, and then 28 days for settlement, we can still settle the property within.
No cash offers out in Byford, is what you're telling me?
No, hardly, especially at those price points.
And loan to value ratios are quite high?
Yes, very high. 90s to 95s is quite common. The most common one I do see is the 95s. Any property obviously under that 850k mark that we're selling, if it's going to a first home buy, it's normally very common to be 95. And that's why I was saying those interest rates play a big part of our prices, because they're going to dictate what they're going to offer.
Now, I know you don't sell any of these because that's down to the house and land specialists, but do you see much house and land package activity out in Byford, or is most of it done?
No, I still do see quite a lot of it, actually, to be honest, Trent. On realestate.com, there are quite a lot of house and land packages that are still being released. I'd say there's more house and land packages that I've seen there than actual just vacant land for sale in Byford. And that's probably another great point to talk about. Having a look at Byford the other day, and the land that's for sale, there's only 2 blocks of land for sale. Everything else is either sold or gone or being built on or being sold as a house and land package.
Okay, interesting. So most of it's still tied up with the builders.
Yes.
Now, talking about affordability, what's the cheapest thing I can buy in Byford?
The cheapest thing you can buy in Byford is probably a 3x2, because Byford's one of those suburbs where we don't have apartments. We very rarely have duplexes, rarely have triplexes.
No strata, yeah.
Hardly any strata properties. There's a few here and there and some sort of pockets behind KFC, but hardly any strata pockets. In the last 12 months, the cheapest property that I personally sold was around that sort of 650 mark, and that was a 2x1 in Byford with a double car garage.
What would that be worth now?
That would still be worth around the 680 mark now. 680, 670.
So it would have had an opportunity in the 700s, and it's probably now sitting at the 680 space.
Yeah. Last year I thought that property, when it was bought, I thought by the end of the year it'll be upwards of the 700,000. But now and where we are in the market, I'd heavily say that property would only be worth around that sort of 60, 70, 680 mark.
Yeah, got you. Yeah. So not a lot of options for downsizing either. No. Where are people going if they want to downsize?
So if they have to downsize, which is very common, they'll go into a 3x2, and they will pay that 700, 710, 720 mark for a 3x2 green title block. And it's funny that you asked me, because a lot of my clients in Byford, from what I've experienced so far, they just stay in Byford. So you're normally going to get a first home buyer comes into market, they buy a 4x2 on 400 squares, then they upgrade to that quarter acre. And then if they do upgrade further from there, they'll go into a half an acre or an acre property in one of the large ones. And then those clients who end up living there for 20 odd years, they come back around and go, actually, no, we need an appraisal now because this is too much to maintain. And then what you find is they're like, can you find me a 3x2 in Byford as well? And then they just come back down to the sort of the food chain. And
to be
that's
honest,
the beautiful thing about Byford.
It's the story we hear across Perth all the time. It might not be in one suburb, but it might be in a pocket of 4 or 5 suburbs where everyone just cycles through their community. Really. I love it. That's what community is all about.
Absolutely.
Is that familiarity. Sean, let's finish this suburb profile off by having a quick chat about your favourite street in Byford.
Awesome.
Which one is it?
I'd personally say that Old Brickworks Road is probably one of the most beautiful streets in Byford. It's got some of the nicest houses, the most beautiful views. However, I have to give a special shout. If you're going to ask me the question what my favourite street is, it's in the Glades. It's Crillon Way in Byford. A big shout out to that street, because every time I go there, there's always people outside. There's always people saying hello. I've sold a few on that street now, and I've never seen a street full of so many close friends that are neighbours. Like, they all hang out, they're all catching up, the families all know each other, and it's probably one of the things I love about Byford, because none of those families knew each other before they moved there. And that community to see, every time you drive on that street, there's just really nice people always saying hello.
It's a very quiet street. It's a very green street.
Yes.
And well maintained.
Very well maintained. Yeah, if you're not doing your lawns on that street, someone's going to say something.
A few caravans as well. So
yeah, absolutely. Lots of toys.
It's interesting that to cross one suburb, you can see that massive variety of socio-demographic, really.
Yeah.
And in here, I guess the thing that defines Crillon Way is it's in a very quiet pocket where there's no reason anyone would drive through it unless they lived there.
Yes, absolutely.
What would I pay for a property on Crillon Way?
We sold one recently, and That sold for $980. There was another sale that did recently sell, and that ticked over the $1 million.
So what makes these properties worth 20-something% more than the one we were just speaking about?
Main thing is your land size. These are all looking roughly about the 700 square metres. A lot of them have the very demanded site access. A lot of them do have pools, sheds on that sort of suburb block. So they've got all the toys, everything from storage to shed to the big house to the nice ceilings, all in that one package, and you don't have the downside of maintaining all the grass and things like that. You know, it's very maintainable.
Big houses.
But big houses, yeah.
And I guess this is one of the older subdivisions, given the size of the square meterage. It's very well maintained.
Yes. A lot of those houses there are getting between that 5 to 10 year mark now, where there's some subdivisions happening in Byford, which are just happening now, and they're a lot smaller, around that sort of 350 square metre mark.
Last question. What's the median house price in Byford?
$850,000.
Where will it be in 12 months?
I'm going to say that it'll be around the 800,000 mark.
So you're seeing negative growth over the next 12 months in Byford?
The way that it's going at the moment, the way that I'm experiencing it, my home opens now and my talks with buyers, I believe that. The only thing that would conflict that if the RBA decides to cut those interest rates, and possibly in 12 months' time we might be having the conversation where I look like a bit of an idiot and it's gone up. But at this moment, I don't know.
No, look, I love the candid nature. I love the honesty, because what you're seeing is on the ground. The reason we're having a conversation today about Byford is because, as I said, it's one of those suburbs where the tide's going to pull out first, right?
Yep.
And whilst I still believe we'll see positive growth over 12 months in Perth's median price, you've always got, over the 400 suburbs, some that have got negative growth and some that have positive growth. So in a 20% growth environment in Perth, you might have 5 suburbs out of the 400 that are still negative, right? For whatever reason, they had a massive year the year before and they've balanced off this year, right? And when you've got a Perth median price that is dropped 10% in 2018,
yeah,
you'll still have 40 suburbs that grew that year, right?
Yes.
So in an environment where we might say 5 to 10% growth over Perth next year, that means that out of the 400 suburbs, there are going to be 40, 50, even more suburbs that will probably experience in their own right negative growth.
Yep.
As the average, the median ends up being between 5 and 10. There'll be some that'll have 15% growth. Byford's had a bloody good run.
It's had a great
It's had
run.
some of the best growth across Perth for a few years now.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is probably just a rebalancing from the furor, from the FOMO, the craziness, especially with the way the interest rates were planning to go in the 5% scheme, to probably, a bit of a rebalancing over 10 years is still pretty good. Sean, thanks so much for coming in, mate. I appreciate it. Great insights, candid insights, and I hope everyone gets some value out of this.
Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Perth Property Show. If you've only just joined the conversation, you can catch up by heading over to our website, perthpropertyshow.com.au, subscribing to the podcast, or joining our Facebook page. Don't forget to tune in next Monday at 7 a.m. for more expert insights, local analysis, and suburb spotlights. Happy hunting!